The secret to true happiness is low expectations and insensitivity. That was written by Olivia Goldsmith, the author of The First Wives Club. I knew that quote would get your attention. The secret to true happiness is low expectations. I mean, if you know me, you know I tend to think big. I tend to go for it and make things happen, at least insofar as walking every step to the bitter end of 2 long-distance trails that have a tendency to spit out the young, the brash, and the fast. So why on earth would I start a podcast suggesting happiness comes from setting your goals low? Well, let's talk about that. This is the Blissful Hiker Podcast, and I'm Allison Young, the solo, female, middle-aged, titanium-reinforced, long-distance backpacker blissful hiker. I share stories to inspire you to learn to hike your own hike. If you enjoy these podcasts, please consider supporting them through Patreon. There's a link in the show notes or at blissfulhiker.com. A few years back, I spearheaded a new podcast for the online hiking site The Trek. It was fascinating speaking with experts from myriad backgrounds and interests, all addicted to my favorite sport, backpacking. And one such person who I've become friends with is Dr. Elizabeth Andre. She teaches in the outdoor education department at Northland College in Ashland, Wisconsin, and she has this great course called Outdoor Fundamentals, Everything You Need to Know to Stay Safe. At first, it seemed logical that our conversation would cover practices every backpacker should know to manage risks. But what really grabbed me in her course was the psychology of risk, meaning our inability to control our emotions, our habits, our prejudices when making decisions, ones that often mean the difference between an uncomfortable experience and a devastating one. As we spoke, I thought of the concepts of summit fever and sunk cost fallacy. I've written a lot about these in the Insights section at blissfulhiker.com, and they speak to our obsession with a goal, to the point we ignore obvious dangers and might act recklessly to attain that goal. The thinking is often, well, I've paid so much money, or I've taken so long to train, or I've come so far, with the next sentence being, I can't give up now. It's always so interesting to me that because I'm a long-distance backpacker and I set these huge goals, a lot of people expect that going for it and perseverance and grit are all that I'm about. But on the flip side, there have been a lot of tragedies for people who have gone for it with grit. I mean, see deaths on Mount Everest due to bottlenecks, as an example. So little has been written on setting realistic goals. Or maybe I should rephrase that to say, realistic goals, aka low expectations, are not often celebrated as a more powerful means to an end. I mean, let me explain. When you set one big, hairy, audacious, lofty goal, your life tends to revolve around getting there. You push hard, focusing on it every day, and yet, when you can't reach it, you actually fail. I mean, you fail every day, maybe just a little bit, but those little bits, day after day, add up, and the goal begins to feel impossible to reach. The irony, though, is that if you reach it, the joy you feel inevitably fades. In addition, that feeling of having to achieve the one big goal puts blinders on us. It feeds into the summit fever idea that we need to get this one thing at all costs. The solution, I think, is to, rather than set goals, to build systems. Systems are tiny, bite-sized goals with built-in flexibility. When I had both hips replaced and looked at months and months of healing before I could return to some sense of normalcy as a backpacker, it was impossible to digest. It was too big, it was too long, it was too intimidating. And the same holds for long through hikes, where the end is certainly on your mind, but it's too far away to comprehend. every day requires patience and a kind of gentleness with oneself, and that makes that particular portion, that one day, a success. Oddly enough, when we create a system, we find more joy in our accomplishments because each day brings its own rewards and discoveries, especially if we stay more in the present and focus ourselves in the now of our bite-sized goals. So, set your sights low within the context of setting them high. And in the words of Olivia Goldsmith, stay insensitive and flexible to your emotions that tell you you have to go for that one goal no matter what. And I guarantee it, before you know it, you'll be at the summit. You can subscribe to Blissful Hiker wherever you get your podcasts. And if you listen on Apple, please leave a review that helps the show get discovered. So right now I'm preparing for my artist in residence at the Porcupine Mountains Wilderness. I'll spend 10 days living in a remote cabin, collecting sounds of early spring, and writing essays to make audio narratives of my experience. Right now, you can hear 2 episodes about my backpacking trip in the Porcupine Mountains Wilderness from last fall. It's in the Blissful Hiker podcast. And there'll be a lot more to listen to when I return. Until then, my friends, kia kaha and happy trails.